Today we're going to go over tips on the lesson plans for edtpa. I've made these tips after looking at the edtpa tasks and the new Ohio Northern lesson plan that we'll be using next semester as we student teach. The first goal, or the first tip, is the central focus. All lesson plans should involve a central focus somehow. The central focus is a long-term goal that unites the learning targets. It does not have to be accomplished with every learning segment, but it still has to incorporate it somehow. The next tip is for edtpa you have to use the state adopted content standards. You cannot use the national. But for technology, the national and the state are about interchangeable, so that makes it easier, but you still have to make sure when you put them into your lesson plan it is the state standards, not national standards. The next one is one that I found most interesting probably between the lesson plan and edtpa is lesson plans can be no more than 4 pages. This is to make sure you're being precise, you're just using the information you need and not just putting fluff into a lesson plan. But with that being said, make sure that you make it detailed enough that if a substitute teacher comes in, they can still teach the lesson for that day. What I found interesting is like the O&U lesson plan is 4 pages already, and it doesn't have much room for you to enter information between each question. So you still have to answer the questions, but don't use fluff to answer them. The next one is make sure the lesson plan is somewhat flexible. You might go into a lesson thinking it is the greatest lesson you've ever taught, you've ever put together. But when you go in and start teaching it, the students might not think so. They might think it's boring, uninteresting, anything. So you have to be able to make a change on the fly. If the students are uninterested, they're probably going to have behavioral problems in the class, they're not going to pay attention, they're not going to do the homework, or any of the work for that matter, because they don't care about it. So you need to make them care. You need to make them be engaged. So if you're just lecturing the whole time and they don't care, you need to be able to change it to maybe a call and response. You have a debate in the class about it. Anything to engage them so they're not just bored, which will lead to other problems in the classroom. The next one is make sure you explain how and why throughout the lesson, no matter what it is. Most of the time it is used with theory for it, how and why are you doing this. And if you use how and why, students get a better understanding as well because they see why it is important for them to learn, why they need to know it and utilize it. It helps with edtpa and getting students to understand it better. And then the next one is informal and formal assessment. You need to make sure you allow all students to demonstrate what they have learned. So if you have little Johnny over here, straight A student, above and beyond everyone else, but you have little Billy over here that's distracted all the time, C student at best, you need an assessment that's able to get both of them to show what they've learned without being the same. Because if you give them the same thing, Johnny's going to be fine on it, little Billy isn't going to be able to show you much. So you got to be able to make sure the assessment works for all students, not just the top notch, not just the lower end of the students. And then this next one goes towards like the end when you're turning in everything for edtpa. Do not change your lesson plan after you teach it. Make sure you submit the lesson plan you did for that lesson. Then what I suggest is making a copy of it after you submit it and writing on the copy things you change, things you take out, things you'd add, anything that you think would benefit the lesson plan. Make a copy and do that on the copy, not on the original lesson plan, because edtpa wants to see the original lesson and compare it to the video and what you changed during it, but not what you changed on the actual lesson plan. make sure you cite and give credit to all material that you did not create yourself. So if you take worksheets, use a website, use a PowerPoint, anything that you did not create yourself, that you found online, got from another teacher, anything, make sure you cite that in your lesson plan. Usually under materials, you'll have to say PowerPoint, or it'll ask what you use with worksheet, website, anything. Make sure you put down what it is, where you got it from, and who made it. Just give them the credit that they deserve for actually making it. There's nothing wrong with taking other people's saying, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but just give them credit where it is due. And then finally, this is more for pretty much all of edtpa. Dr. Cordy said it the most: reflect. Reflect on everything you do. Reflect on the lesson plan as a whole. Is there something you could have done better? Is the lesson worth the students knowing? Could you change it? Could you change all of it? It's possible that maybe you have changed everything about that lesson plan. And then reflect on the standards you used. For technology, you could use 4 standards to cover one thing, and they all 4 could go together. But maybe one works better than the others, and maybe you'll see that after you teach it. And like I said, don't change it in the lesson plan, but change it for your future lessons. Because you're always going to want to keep these lessons for future use, but if you can change it, and that'll help you later on know what worked and what didn't. And then at the end, reflect on how you gave the information. If you just lectured the whole time, maybe the students are better doing an activity or teaching each other. Find out what the students are better at, and maybe they did fine with the lecture, but find out how they do with that. And maybe reflect on how it could have been different, how it could have been better. Maybe it couldn't have, but most times it can always be made better with how you do it. And with those tips, I hope it helps with you when you're doing the lesson plans for the edtpa. Good luck next year.